You have been in this industry. I mean, why don't you tell me what's the years we're looking at now? Because you own a gym, you've been a coach for many years. What are we looking at?
We are looking at around about the 12-year mark, I think,
Wow.
in as a coach. Yeah,
Okay.
it's been a while now.
Look, when you look back on 12 years, let's we work with a lot of personal trainers and coaches. We deliver Cert 3 and 4, we teach them, we educate them. And I think a lot of young trainers and coaches, they look at a guy like you, pretty successful, has a pretty very large following, a lot of clients, got a gym. Some people use that as like, wow, that's empowering. Like, look what I can do. Some people like, I don't even know where to begin. Like, that's intimidating. Like, if you stripped it back, what do you tell the young coaches and trainers and businessmen and women, entrepreneurs who would like to emulate your journey in their own way to get to a version of what you have now?
That's a great question. I think the really important thing to consider in all of this is that 12 years is a very long time.
Mm.
I think people often underestimate what they're capable of, and with that in mind, I think it's really important to think about the fact that uh, whilst I've no doubt taken a couple of opportunities that have been presented my way, I haven't achieved all of this at the same time. It has taken 12 years to get to where I am. So um, I think maybe in hindsight, if this was my intention and this was the goal originally, maybe I would have taken a slightly shorter path to get here. But I think as we all do, we learn and we grow as we get older, and we get pushed in different directions until we sort of find the thing that we enjoy the most. When I first started out as a personal trainer, I can assure you it wasn't to set out to do what I'm doing right now. It was just so I could make a decent hourly wage while I was studying at university. And before long, it sort of started to pique my interest a little bit more, and a decent hourly wage became more of a full-time job, and that sort of fueled the intention of learning more, becoming better at what I was doing, marketing myself, building more of a brand rather than just being a personal trainer that
Yeah.
worked out of a franchise gym. Um, and I guess I just sort of, continued to climb the ladder, I guess. And I guess every step of the way, it was more a case of what makes the most sense for me right now. And, I think for a good chunk of those 12 years, I can assure you that for the majority of the time, people would ask me, you planning on opening a gym? And for the majority of those 12 years, my answer was definitely not.
Yeah. Why was
So
it no? And why did that change?
Uh, well, it changed because of my wife. So that was, yeah. Basically, to be honest, man, I did a lot of in-person training when I first started out. And outside of the initial sort of financial outlay, it was fairly low stress in terms of financial buy-in, online business, very low financial buy-in, and very little risk associated with running those sorts of businesses. And having been part of several gyms in the past, having a reasonable understanding of the expenses that go on with operating a gym or a fitness-based facility,
Mm.
it was just never something on the cards. And it wasn't really until a couple of years, probably 6 to 12 months before we opened Paragon, that we really decided that we wanted to be in control of the decisions that were being made at the gym that we were working out of. We were working in a space that we initially enjoyed, but soon after that, we felt not uncomfortable, but as if the gym was going in a different direction. That was entirely their prerogative. They wanted to set out to achieve their own goals, but at that point in time, we just felt like that direction was different to what we wanted to do, and a lot of the decisions that affected the members and our clients negatively impacted our businesses. So from that moment onwards, it was more a case of how can we create a working environment that is conducive to our success and ensure that we don't get stitched up again, to be
Yeah.
honest. And it sort of grew and snowballed from there. I mean, in hindsight, now that I've opened Paragon, I love it. It's like an absolute joy. Like it brings me nothing but pride now. But initially, it was a lot of hard work,
Mm.
and I'm more than happy to be honest about the fact it's more of a passion project than anything. Like I said, I absolutely love it, but it is not it's not a money printing company. I can tell you that.
Who is it not for? Because I feel like that's a dream for a lot of people. They want to work in elite sport. They want to open their own business and gym. Who? in your experience, who would you advise against it and who would you advise for it? Like, what type of character values do you think are best suited to be successful at what you're doing?
I think there's probably a couple of different answers that I could give
Yeah.
in terms of who it's really good for. I think if you're looking to make a quick buck, it's a horrible idea. It's never really going to work like that. I think if you are an extremely driven entrepreneurial type and you are willing to put in as many hours as is required and build a business that ultimately you own the personal training, and employ all of your coaches, then yeah, you can probably make a pretty handy living off that. But I think for the most part, if you're wanting to open, particularly a smaller gym, without the intention of turning it into a big, franchise fitness first style facility, you got to be passionate about what you do. You got to be sort of community driven and people orientated, because I think at the end of the day, we love Paragon because of the people that are in it, the atmosphere that it creates, the opportunity it gives to people of all training experiences, and the opportunity to meet people and help them grow, whether that be through lifting or life in general, within that environment. So I guess either super, super driven, absolute taskmaster, or community orientated. I'm here for a good time and to make sure that the people that come into my place are there to enjoy themselves.
I think that's a really important note, like to drive it to community and people, because you're right. Like a lot of the forefront of the mind is money.
100%.
And at the end of the day, the service is for people. And so I'm really glad you said that. But do you have like the most common, like not regrettable, but like business mistakes that you've made in the past? Maybe it's hiring, maybe it's finances, maybe it's, I don't know, any business mistakes that you would tell a younger version of Nick, or even just coaches and entrepreneurs who are beginning to start their own business in this industry?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple I can run you through pretty quickly. Actually, there's plenty of them to pick from, but I think the most important ones are, you mentioned financial. The first thing I'd recommend anybody looking to set up their own business, or even just a personal trainer as a sole trader, is to keep your financials somewhat separate to your personal financials. Don't let company money become your money accidentally and accrue an enormous tax bill without even realizing it. I can assure you that stings more than just a little bit. And I think, you can never plan too much. And with that in mind, you can never forecast too many situations. I like to think that I did a lot of planning before we opened Paragon, being the fact that it was obviously a bricks and mortar facility. There was a lot more risk, particularly financial, in my eyes before we opened that place. But in spite of all of the projections and planning that I did, I never could have accounted for the original landlord that we had signed a lease with doing a backflip. After having sent it off to the lawyers and everything. We were a couple of days from moving in, and all of a sudden we were without a facility, and another 3 or 4 months without our own gym. And then I guess one other thing, which I guess is more of a hindsight style thing, is if you're going to spend money, spend it once, spend it well, don't spend it twice.
I think that's big on like getting quality equipment. Like, what do you? That's what you're referring to?
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's go practical. Like, what is that? Like, what do you recommend? Do you give an example of like, all right, guys, this, like, maybe you don't have to give one that you stay away from, but what's a really quality equipment brands that you'd recommend? What worked for you?
Well, I mean, we've literally just put in a brand new equipment order with Atlantis, who I would probably consider to be, the Ferrari of gym equipment. Nice. In terms of branding, quality. It's a bit of a challenge to get into the country. Obviously, Atlantis don't actually import themselves, so you have to go through a third party. But once it arrives, phenomenal equipment. But yeah, I mean, when we first started out, like I said, the whole planning side of things, we did as much as we could. But unfortunately, I'm really good at fitness stuff, not so good at council planning, town planning, building certification, all those sorts of things. So, like I said, despite all the planning, we still had plenty of hiccups and speed bumps along the way, namely, the last minute inclusion of having to build a fully accessible and disabled bathroom that we just hadn't budgeted for. So with that in mind, we ended up probably not cutting corners, but we made a decision to go with equipment that in hindsight, I probably would have preferred to have just waited out or stretched just a little bit further to ensure that the facility we opened was what it is now.
When you're faced, like you mentioned numerous examples where you're faced with like something, you plan it, like you planned well, you thought, but then life hits you in the face. Mm-hmm. And I wonder in that moment, like a lot of people, they don't cope well with uncertain turmoil. How do you handle those situations personally? Like, because what do you take away from them? How do you recommend people handle the uncertain turmoil, especially within business that will come our way?
Well, I mean, I guess, every experience like that is an opportunity to learn. I guess now if I ever open another gym, I'm aware of a few other things that could go wrong. But, at the end of the day, these things aren't personal. No building certifier is standing there saying, I really don't like you as a person, so you need to build a disabled bathroom. It's just the way things go. If I'd done a little bit more research, I probably would have realized that the facility we rented in the first place was going to have to require building a disabled bathroom and have been able to factor that into our costs. But, at the end of the day, I think if you are in business and you are making the decision to do something entrepreneurial, not a huge fan of that word, but it explains the concept pretty well. If you are going to be doing that sort of thing whereby you're taking risks to start a business, I think the sooner you can come to terms with the fact that things will go wrong, they can go wrong and will go wrong at times, I think it becomes a little bit easier to cope with. Obviously, having a great support system in place. My wife, girlfriend at the time, was fantastic. We opened the gym together. My parents, were able to help out a lot. My mum's actually a bathroom designer, so she was able to help out with choosing tiles and bathrooms and all that sort of stuff. It's business, man. Things are going to go wrong, and I think a lot of the times it's how do you react so that we can stay afloat and continue to thrive. I mean, look at COVID this year as an example. A lot of people had to be put into a position whereby it's time to pivot or die.
That. Yeah, that's like a subtitle for 2020. Well,
right,
for like the last, and I don't think it's going anywhere too fast. So, what do you take away? Like when you reflect back on the last year, maybe this is something you've been asked already or you've reflected upon, but the last year and a half, what do you take away as kind of the most life-changing, perspective-changing lessons, personally, business, all of the above?
I think it was a really good reminder to not get too comfortable. Nothing is permanent, particularly in business. And I think the more that you can sort of hinge on things being of a more temporary status, the more likely you are to continue trying to learn and do better and, create more security in time. I think there's a lot of, business owners out there, personal trainers out there, coaches, whatever they are, and myself included from time to time, that get comfortable. They're like, well, business is great right now. I don't need to continue doing anything to continue to attract new leads and bring in new business. But, we saw from COVID that bang, all of a sudden the government makes a decision, gyms are now closed. What do you do from here? And, that was something that, I've never even thought that could happen. When they decided to close the gyms, I was like, this surely has to be a joke. Like, how can they just make a decision that affects so many people's livelihoods? But fortunately, we were able to, just like I said, pivot and, stay away from dying.
How'd you pivot though? Like, what systems, habits, things did you create to keep going?
Yeah. Okay. So I guess, it's nowhere near as impressive as, a beer company turning into producing hand sanitizer or anything like that. But, we've got a bunch of really loyal members and we've got a bunch of members that love their training. So we were able to put ourselves in a position where we rented out pretty much our entire gym inventory. Our gym was completely empty for that sort of 3 to 4 month period. And we hired out all of our equipment to try and cover as many costs as we possibly could. I rented out my parking spaces from the gym. and did basically anything we could to help with programming throughout that time, in addition to obviously delivering and helping out with the maintenance of that equipment while it was at our members' houses. And when all of our members had been, had the opportunity to rent everything, I then sort of turned to the public and said, we've still got a few things left if you want to try and rent an office. So we were able to, almost cover some of our rent expense. And then fortunately, despite the fact that both my business and my wife's business took an immediate downturn when COVID happened due to a lot of people losing their jobs and finances becoming a little bit tighter, I did find from that point onwards that there were still people wanting to spend money out there. So it just meant that, we were still able to grow, particularly from our personal coaching business perspectives. And then obviously that was able to help with supplementing the fact that we wanted to try and keep our passion project alive.
Mm. It's a simple pivot, but it seemed effective for you guys. I mean,
sorry, on top of that, at the time we were not desperate, but we obviously wanted to explore all avenues. So we ended up going back to our landlord as well towards the end of that period and just said, hey, look, we're not really sure how much longer this might last.
Yeah.
But, we essentially just tried to begin negotiations with him whereby we asked for some form of rental relief in exchange for adding additional months onto the end of our lease period, as a way of saying, if you can scratch our back right now, then we'll scratch yours by staying for longer. And I can't remember the agreement that we offered to him. I think it was, if you can give us any sort of rent relief, we'll add an extra 2 months onto the end of our lease for every month of relief you can give us. But then fortunately towards pretty much, shortly after I sent that email, fortunately, we were allowed to reopen again. But, it's just, I think in those situations, it is a little bit of a backs up against the wall type scenario. So I think you just need to get creative. We were actually quite fortunate because, throughout that period, I know quite a few other gym owners, and I know a bunch of them banded together. We created a Facebook group, and there must have been somewhere between 50 and 60 gym owners in that group from around various parts of Australia. Obviously, the rules were slightly different from state to state, but it was really handy, sort of having those guys as a support network too. We're able to bounce some ideas off each other, and ultimately that was where that sort of trend of hiring out equipment came from in order to figure out a way that we could all stay afloat, and obviously bounce ideas off one another and all those sorts of things. So support networks in those sorts of times, very, very handy, but obviously being somewhat resourceful, or as resourceful as you can, I think is a really good thing too.
Yeah, you're proactive. Like, you were actively seeking and a community. You talk about community, like you seeked it, you found it, and you used it to facilitate better decision making, to adapt.
100%.
Do you, you have just a giant amount of people who follow you, right? I wonder, it's like if you put all those people in like a room or a stadium, it'd blow your mind.
Yeah. I mean, I've actually thought about that a couple of times, and I agree. Yeah, it's a lot of people. I don't understand how that happened.
Oh, that's what I wanted to ask. Like, sometimes that just happens, right? But there had to be. I'm kind of fascinated with how the growth of business, brands, and people occurs. Like, everybody has moments, like sparks. If you go back in time, what were some of the sparks that gave you the most growth and attention that really transformed, like, another stepping stone to grow your business and brand?
Okay, well, I can answer that in a couple of different ways. You asked for sort of like moments or things that happened.
Yeah.
Nothing specifically on Instagram ever really happened like that. However, I do remember there was a couple of posts on Facebook that went pretty viral. In fact, I remember, like, my Facebook page wasn't something that I would check, every day. And I remember posting a video up there one day and I had about 50,000 followers. And the next time I checked, I had 450,000 followers. I was like, what the hell has just happened here? And I ended up just posting a very simple workout video that I think ended up getting something around 20 million views. And, this is obviously years and years ago, back when the Facebook algorithm was a little bit more favorable. But, on top of that, to be brutally honest, when I was a little bit younger, social media was a lot more important to me than it is now. And there was certainly an element of ego attached to that number on my account. And so there was a lot more drive to grow that number. To be honest, I was doing pretty much everything I could be to gain as much exposure across as many platforms as I possibly could. Now, on top of that, I tend to think I was putting out very good content. Back in the day that I was doing it, realistic, like not a lot of people were putting out content. Back then it was all a secret how people lost weight, and the best methods for training. Well, you have to pay me for that. And I just took the approach that, well, I mean, anything that these people need to know can be found on the internet. So why don't I just give it to them so that if they ever need a coach, or if they ever need a trainer, or if they ever want to show their friends who they're learning from, it's me. And so I just started putting out, a lot of consistent information. I tried to become an authority on, one, maybe two major topics. And those ended up being sort of flexible dieting, if it fits your macros, and, strength training. I did a lot of DUP style programming back then. And that was pretty much me in a nutshell. I tried to put out as much information on those topics as I could to help people, with the intention of giving them every opportunity to know that I was both an authority on those subjects, and that if they needed to know anything about either one of those topics, that I was the place to go to.
Do you think if you were to restart all over, you go to zero, no one knows who you are, right? What approach do you take? Do you take the same approach? What do you take? What do you don't take? What do you do different?
Yeah, I'd probably take a similar approach. And if I'm brutally honest, I probably dropped the ball a little bit in terms of my social media game the last couple of years, as I've, become older and become, I guess, more obsessed with finding joys outside of social media and actually experiencing life a little bit more. I have struggled to stay on top of my social media game because I do find it somewhat suffocating at times. The constant pursuit of creating new content and, creating stuff that's engaging with people and responding to comments and just staying active on those platforms all of the time is draining. I'm not going to lie. I've been doing it, like I said, I've been a coach for 12 years and I probably haven't been on social media for that long, but I did, probably 3 to 5 years of pretty heavy social media use. And I'm a little bit over it, to be honest. So I probably have dropped the ball, but if I did have to go back, I think consistency is the key at this point in time. I'm certainly no Instagram algorithm genius or guru. I can promise you that, but it does seem to me like the guys and girls growing the quickest and getting the most engagement are the ones that post very frequently.
What's that practically mean, very frequently?
I see them posting pretty much every day. Yeah. I don't know how you have time to do anything else if you're posting more than once a day. Like, that's a lot of content. You got to have teams to be able to do that.
Gary Vaynerchuk type business where he's posting multiple times a day, got a team of people around him.
Yeah, exactly. But I think, that's all well and good for Gary V, right? Like, he is who he is. He became who he was before he probably started doing that. There was probably an element of himself doing that to some extent when he first started to become who he is. But at the same time, getting a team and employing that team from day dot, that doesn't give you a lot of face value to whoever it is you're trying to attract. And I think that's always been both a blessing and a curse with the way that I have built, I guess, my following, in that, it's always been me. All of the products I've ever put out there have always been me and quite labor intensive in terms of the way that I work with people, which has made, it more difficult to scale in that respect. But at the same time, I've found that anytime I've tried to take my face away from things, it's never been as successful. People want to get involved with my products because I'm the one pushing them. So, as far as social media is concerned, I think, definitely high frequency posting would be the way that I go about it. And I guess I try and show as much of who I am and my personality as I possibly can, because I think at the end of the day, a lot of people will vibe with the person in addition to the content.
Interesting. So you'd get in front of the camera, however that may be. Did you do that back in the day? Were you very like how-to videos and like talking to the camera?
Yes and no.
Okay, so mix.
I think more so on like Snapchat stories, stuff like that. I tried a little bit on YouTube, but I hate YouTube. So I just found the amount of time it would take me to film and record videos and then edit them and then get them up for a handful of people to watch them.
It's like a part-time job.
Mate, honestly, I like props to those people who have done it successfully and have huge followings now. It's probably like, if you're going to pick one, I think that's probably the one to pick, because you actually get paid for people watching that stuff when you get advertising dollars. But when I started, the time cost to benefit ratio was just so low in comparison to Instagram or Facebook, considering I already had an established following on both of those platforms. It was just, why am I bothering spending hours and hours doing this when I could just go and get 4 or 5 photos and I've got 5 posts for Instagram,
Right. For time, effort, energy, cost
100%. Yeah, it
effectiveness.
would suck the life out of me.
Well, that's
And
fair enough.
yeah,
It's like,
so pick your poison. Go with that.
yes. You said something interesting though. You said like you're, from what I heard, you're trying to prioritize, or things are a bit changing in your life, and what's a priority, like trying to experience more joy and experience in life now. How did you, because to get to where you are, to have a gym, to do all these things, to have a successful business and this large of an audience, you got to put in a large degree of hard, smart, and consistent work, usually for many, many years. And some people don't get off that treadmill. Some people just, all right, let's go, more dollars in the bank account, more zeros, more muscle, more this, more following. Where are you with that? Is it just, no, I'm still obsessed. I'm still constantly like, I'm trying to squeeze as much as I can? Or is it a reframe where you've come to, it's like, that stuff isn't as important to me, and I'm trying to prioritize this other thing in life? Like, where do you sit amongst all that?
I'd like to think I'm the latter now.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, like I said before, I attached an unhealthy amount of ego to that number of people that was following me initially, and as a consequence of that, I probably put in a lot more effort to my social media, and that was partly one of the reasons that I probably succeeded in building that following to what it is right now. But mate, there came a point in time where I felt like my relationships were suffering. My overall life quality was, it wasn't overly great. I felt like, you get to a point where it's like, I've got these people that follow me. I'm able to help a lot of people. I'm able to put out a lot of content. I'm able to earn the money that I want to earn, but for what purpose? And if all you're ever doing is working, it's just a lonely existence. And, I'll be the first person to put my hand up and say that it wasn't, just me that came to that realization. My wife is very intuitive. She's very, very worldly. She's just a very intelligent, high thinking person, essentially. And, we do a lot of reflecting, and she does a lot of reflecting, and I try and match her for that. But, we've had a lot of conversations about, why we do what we do, because if all we do is work, what is the point? And, there's been a couple of times where I've just been like, what am I doing? And so, I guess with those things in mind, it's more a case now of how can I, still find some fulfillment through the work that I do. I'm not going to lie. Like, my personality is geared towards working hard and being successful. Like, that is who I am. I'm not sure if you're a fan of the Enneagram, but I am a type 3 personality. And so when I'm at my most unhealthy, I am pretty much on my computer 24/7 grinding. And that is just not the best version of myself, And so when I can get away from that, and when I can focus on the fact that I am more than my successes, then my life becomes a whole lot more enjoyable and fulfilled, basically.
Your life is you're more than your successes. Do you feel like as people, we have to, like, can we come to that realization of what you're coming to now, of like, okay, it's important. Like, this other stuff, relationships, connection with human beings, like, that's really important to you now. Do you think everybody has to get to the point where they push it too far to the extreme to really actualize and realize that? Or do you think you can hear someone like you? I heard Nick say this. I heard Alexander say this. It makes sense to me. I got it. Like, now I can preempt it and don't have to make that mistake. Or do you feel like it's very like, no, you have to really push it to feel it and change it?
Yeah, I think for people that are built the way that I am built, in terms of, having a similar personality, actually going through it and living through that challenge and coming to that realization is probably going to be what's required for the most part. I think other people, like my wife, for instance, she's not, she has a very different personality type, whereby she almost, particularly during times of, high stress and all those sorts of things, she doesn't get to a point where she ever feels like she works as hard as I do. It's just never in her mindset to do that. Everyone's different in that regard, but I think for people that are geared towards working, grinding, and getting the job done and valuing success, then yeah, it's going to be hard to figure out that other things in life matter too. I guess, like I said, it really depends on what you consider to be important in life, and whether or not you're willing to go through those challenges and those hardships to learn otherwise, whether that's work or whether that's anything else in life.
What's a reflection that you guys did to realize that? Because you said you're doing some reflections. Like, do you have like a practice, meditation, journaling, that anything that you would recommend to people to figure that out?
I think it's important that everyone has their own form of meditation. I guess we don't do active sort of meditation or journaling or anything like that. I personally don't. I do speak to, I guess I wouldn't call her a psychologist or a counselor, but she is a very wise human being. I guess she would probably fall underneath the heading of counselor, or she refers to herself as an energy healer. So she does a lot of different things, but she's a really good communicator, and she's helped both me and my wife a lot with our communication styles and a lot of business-minded stuff, just to have, I guess, a more three-dimensional view of things. And I guess by working with her on a consistent basis over the last 3 to 5 years, I've been able to, put myself in a position where I'm reflecting on my actions and what I do a lot more, not necessarily through scheduled reflection sessions or anything like that. It's more just a case of thinking more about my own behavior and who I am as a person, and perhaps who I want to work towards being, instead of just falling into the habit of I've got spare 20 minutes, I'll just go and do some emails.
What's the structure? It reminds me, what's the structure of the average day look like now? Like, what are your systems in place that keep you high functioning in your business, running like a well-oiled, efficient machine?
Man, I'd love to give you like a real clear-cut response that makes me sound like an absolute boss for this, but man, try as I might, I do struggle with the whole structure thing. I'm not going to lie. The weeks that I nail it, I feel fantastic. But I also struggle with the idea that when I do nail it, I tend to fall back into a more unhealthy version of myself. And then I'm like, I really nailed this week. I've been so productive. I just want to keep doing that again, and that is basically me in a nutshell. I feel good about succeeding and being productive, so I want to keep doing it. And then all of a sudden, all I'm doing is focusing on work again, and I'm falling out of balance. But for the most part, Tuesday and Thursday, every single week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we end up being in the gym. So on those days are the days that I will schedule any in-person coaching. I only work with about 5 or 6 clients in person at the moment. The rest of my client base is actually online. Mondays and Sundays are pretty much just spent in my office doing client check-ins, programming for the week ahead. And then the majority of the remainder of the week is either structured in a manner that allows me to get out on 2 wheels. Just bought a brand new motorbike, so that's a lot of fun. And anything else that helps me with propelling myself forward in business. So working on new projects, creating content, training, and doing anything that might need to be done, writing emails, writing social media posts, putting together any sort of campaign, whatever it might be, that sort of stuff.
How do you hold yourself accountable to that? Do you have like a, some people like a system, like a habit or a tool and resource that is kind of like a lifesaver for you? Like some people use Google Sheets and are really good at using that as a tool for all their programming templates. Some people have really well-tuned booking systems where they don't have to be attached to, communicating with clients for such, back and forth things. Like, is there things that you've built now that you wish you had earlier, or that young businessmen and women, coaches, like, you got to do this, like, it's going to save you a lot of time?
Yeah, I'll give you one piece of advice. When it comes to building your own platform, don't.
You mean website? What do you mean?
Well, I mean, if you have an idea and you think that you can build a platform that allows you to control your clients and build them, platform, don't do that, because trust me, someone else has done a better job and they've spent millions of dollars on it.
Got it.
Tap into their system, use that.
You mean like an app, for example, that does all your training programs? Or
100%.
Yeah, okay, got
Absolutely.
it. There's so many good ones out there.
Oh, dude, so many, and unfortunately, I've learned that from experience too. That is a rabbit hole, and it's probably one you're not going to get into unless you've got a bottomless wallet. It's just not going to be a smart idea, particularly if you want to make a lot of money. That is a good way to lose a lot of money, not necessarily make it back. So with that in mind, I use 2 premium applications to help with client programming and managing my clients. I use, on top of that, I use Monday, which is just like a basic productivity software that you can get for free. And that is basically just a way that I go about creating my to-do list for the week, which then allows me to create my calendar to sort of figure out when I'm going to do each of those tasks. It also allows me to assign things to my assistant directly to help me out with staying on top of things. I've only really had an assistant for like the last 6 months or so. So don't think that I've had that for ages. It's just me trying to get a little bit more productive with my time.
How much has that helped? Has that regained some control of your time?
Yeah, quite a bit. To be honest, he's not fitness based, so he can't really take anything. It's not like he could program for my clients, right? I'd also feel a little bit inauthentic if I was asking him to do that. But he does a lot of the mindless, tedious work that I need to get done. So whether that be following up with clients to make sure that they submit a check-in, or asking a client why they haven't communicated with me in the last couple of days, making sure that clients don't fall out of touch. He does a lot of graphic design work for me. He manages my website. If I write a blog, he'll post it on my website for me. He can do video editing, all those sorts of things that I just don't want to do, to be honest. Obviously, client communication doesn't fall in things I don't want to do, but having someone to help me with making sure that everybody is, constantly in the loop just makes my life easier. It's like a second set of eyes for things that are not at the top of my mind.
Is there a scalable version? Well, it's not scalable. Like a version of that or anything else that maybe the young coach can't afford yet, but that you would recommend, like, this is the version of that I would recommend, or something to regain control of their time a little bit more effectively and improve the client experience?
I think there are a few things that you can probably implement into your own day-to-day that would help you with prioritizing the more important things. Yeah. Business really gets me going. Obviously, I love fitness too, but the inner workings of how to be more productive and creating systems that make life and business much easier.
Let's go there.
The stuff that really gets me going, right?
Awesome.
And so, I've done a lot of research and reading into ways to become more productive and making the most of your time. And the reality is, there's every chance that if you can get up first thing in the morning and focus your attention on the most important thing that you have to do first thing in the day, chances are that's when you're going to be the most responsive to whatever it is you need to do. You're going to be the most efficient version of yourself first thing in the morning. Get up, get it done, move on with your day. Reactive work, things like responding to clients and doing things that need to be done, they can be done in the afternoon when you're tired, when you aren't quite as sharp, when you aren't firing quite as well. Anyone can answer an email at any time of the day. Don't use the most valuable part of the day, first thing in the morning, to do that. Anyone can answer an email at any time. Leave that for a less important time. But I think the most valuable thing that I ever did when I first started exploring ways to be more productive was literally write out a list of every single thing that you have to do in your business. Every single thing, whether that be responding to emails, writing client programs, sending out emails to a newsletter, creating social media posts, everything. And then ideally rank it in order of importance. And then figure out which ones you can get rid of or figure out which ones you can combine. And ideally, when you get to a point where you can justify it, figure out what you can give to someone else.
Delegate.
Correct.
The morning thing is so powerful cognitively. You haven't made any decisions or many decisions at all. You're quite fresh. You haven't exhausted yourself with the burden of, emotion or decision making.
100%. I'm not sure if you've heard of him, but there's a guy I love to follow. His name's Craig Ballantyne, and he used to be in the fitness space, but now he's more in the productivity space. And he wrote a book called The Millionaire Morning Routine. It didn't cost me like $7.
Yeah,
highly recommend.
Okay. That talks about exactly what we're talking about, starting the day strong.
Yeah, literally, I think he prides himself on being done with work by 12 o'clock every day and makes millions. So
right.
Anyone can claim to do that, but I'm pretty sure he's walking the walk. And some of the advice in that book is just extremely practical stuff that you can read and go, shit, I can do that right now. I can do it tomorrow.
Is there one takeaway that you're like, that's a game changer for me? that you used to use?
He was really big on routine and consistency, which is not always overly possible. I don't think, it's not always possible to get up at 6 a.m. It's not always possible to do X and do Y, but I think if you can build yourself something consistent in the way of a routine, and continue to prioritize planning for that, then you're more often than not going to make sure that you've got enough time to do everything. I think a trap that I often fell into when I was, first taking on all these tasks as my business grew was that, I was like constantly living in fear that I wouldn't have time to fit something in. And so by properly scheduling out my week, I now know that I'm always going to have time to fit in whatever it is I need to do, because I've built out my diary on the to-do list that I've created for the week. And I've been able to fit everything in. I can go and enjoy myself during a period where I'm not working, knowing that I've scheduled in time later in the week to cover off all the tasks. Whereas previously I was like, I don't know when I'm going to get that newsletter done. I don't know when I'm going to respond to my clients. I just better do it now. And so I'd get all this free time and I'd be like, I have to work.
And then it doesn't stop because you have no boundaries.
Exactly right. There are no boundaries. And, at that point in time too, I legitimately had no boundaries. I was living in a 1-bedroom apartment whereby my office was my lounge room. And so like there was no boundary whatsoever between work and play and home and the office. And it was just not a good place to be. It was like running on a hamster wheel and never being able to get off. And that took me a long time to understand and get better at.
That's so important. Like one of the best decisions that I made for my, one of the greatest ones for productivity and for creating boundaries is every room has an association, right? Every place has an association. And if the place you sleep in is also the place you eat in and the place you work in and the place you talk on the phone and the place you, suddenly, you're living in a bit of a chaotic tornado and separating rooms for this is for this, that is for that. It's like you become like, all right, I'm locked in. This is what I'm doing. I'm locked in. That's what I'm doing. It's like, it's so powerful.
100%. I'm literally sitting in my office right now and I can tell you right this second, I don't do anything in here other than work.
That's right. That's right.
There's a bit of storage and stuff going on. And I keep my bike helmets in here, but I come in here to get them out and then leave, or I come into work. That's it.
I think the same thing could be applied to training. We haven't really talked about health, training, nutrition, all that, but I feel so anal about it. If you're on the weightlifting platform, we've done our set and we're talking. No, we're not talking on the platform. This platform, when you step on this platform, you go. You got to focus. But if we start associating just we're hanging out, we're talking, we're checking in, I feel like it crosses some wires where it would be more effective to just step aside, separate, and then step on when we're ready.
Yeah, 100%. I like that. Absolutely, I agree.
With boundaries, you said all right, let's do the reactive tasks later in the day. And I totally feel that, and it's practical and intelligent, but it's also, how do you create that boundary? Because you can disable notifications, but what's your strategy to clients messaging you? You want to get back to them, but how do you actually because it's right there, right? I could just get back to them. I could just solve that problem, right? How do you create that boundary and space to actually make it easier for you to not do the thing that you said you didn't want to do? Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. First thing I do is set appropriate boundaries with all of my clients. That's got to be the first thing you do.
How do you articulate that? What are those boundaries?
You'll always receive a response from me within 24 hours.
Okay.
Not within 2 or 1. They're my clients know that there's very little chance I'll get a response if they send me oh my God, I'm at the gym, I don't know what to do. What should I do? I'm not going to respond to that. If I happen to be on my computer and I've responded to all of the other messages that have come in before you've sent that, and I just happen to be there when it comes in, I might respond if I'm still working. But I make sure to set out that, I set out to make sure that all of my clients get a response to whatever it is they've sent me, a check-in, a message, a question within 24 hours. Now, oftentimes it's well within 12 hours, but at the same time, it gives me that freedom to be like, nah, in fact, I might just squeeze in a training session right now, because I know that, I worked up until 3 hours ago and I cleared all my messages. So worst case scenario, I've still got 21 hours to get back to everybody else. And on that note, I tend to schedule automatically on repeat every week, short 30 to 60-minute sessions in the afternoon of just responding to clients to make sure that, I know every single day, no, fuck it, I'll just get to it at 3.
You've
3
blocked it
o'clock is
out.
typically my hour. Yeah, like literally. And often, we talk about boundaries. It's a terrible boundary for me, but I always go coach my group of girls Tuesday and Thursday afternoon from 4 o'clock. And I know that the hour before then, we have a chiropractor that rents our office. So the hour before then, I literally just sit on our gym floor on one of the benches and I just churn through an hour of emails. Zero boundaries, but I'm always super effective because I know that I've only got 60 minutes in that time to get through a few messages, get as much done as I can, because then I'm coaching for the next few hours after that. And that's going to put another, 2 or 3 hours on that time limit, so to speak. And, I know that I'll obviously have another opportunity the following day, but like I said, I always try and give myself 30 to 60-minute slots most weekdays just to respond to messages and know that I've always got time for that to ensure that I can always stay within that 24-hour period.
When you were first establishing this, like blocking the time, all right, that time is for that. Did you ever begin to almost like cheat and be like, oh yeah, I'll just open the messaging app and just get back to him now and be like, fuck, I shouldn't have done that. Like I got this time for that. Do you ever find yourself like being like, just like that resistance at the start of I've got this task, I can do it now, even though I said I'd do it later, but I just want to get it done. So I've ticked it off my brain. Did you ever struggle with that in the beginning?
Yeah, 100%. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing unless you're changing plans to do that.
Okay.
I mean, oftentimes, particularly, like I said, Tuesday to Thursday, I'm typically at the gym most of the day. We'll typically start a day at 6:30 and I probably won't get home until maybe 7 o'clock that night. And so, whilst I do try and block out my day throughout the day, whilst I set aside time at 3 o'clock, if I end up finishing training early or, things don't quite work out, then yeah, I might just do it a little bit earlier and get it done. Or instead, I just take the opportunity to chat with some of our members and catch up and enjoy myself for that extra bit of time that I found. But I absolutely understand the resistance to change. I think the best thing you can do, though, is figure out what's going to make the most sense in the long run and try and stick to that as best you can. I think there's probably going to be more resistance to change when you're trying to change something that you don't want to change.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big thing in of itself. Like, the psychology of change. But before we get to that, the top end, the bookends of your day, start and end, they can often like be I would say the 80-20 of like making or breaking your day and your next day. What are the habits that you have established and that you establish with your clients so they can win their day?
So, I mentioned, Craig Ballantyne before, and I read his book and I took a lot of the things out of that, and then I sort of changed them around to suit my own schedule a little bit better. Like I said, I do like to focus on the most important thing of my day, whenever I get up and get stuck into work. It just so happens for me that on different days, that happens to be different tasks. So for me, on a Monday and a Tuesday, that actually ends up being a reactive style task. In that Monday and Tuesday is when the majority of my clients end up checking in. Monday because I like my clients to check in on a Monday, just because it makes the most sense to me in my head. But also I like to try and group them together as much as I can. But obviously I've got a lot of clients in the States and overseas that end up checking in on their Monday, so it filters through to me Monday night, so I get to it on Tuesday. So the thing that alleviates the most business-related stress for me on a Monday and Tuesday is churning through check-ins first thing in the morning, getting them done, knowing that I can then free up the rest of my day for a little bit more creative work if that's what I want to do. On top of that, I've also got a lot of programming on those 2 days. So I'll typically bookend the front half of my week with client check-ins and client programming for the following week and beyond. I'm always trying to stay at least 1 week ahead so that no client ever has to run out of a program or ever be waiting on me, if that makes sense. But as far as, clients owning their own day is concerned, I do like to leave that up to them. Obviously, I'm aware that not all of my clients have a similar level of freedom in terms of their own days. A lot of them work 9 to 5s, or whatever work hours they have, they're working for somebody else, so they're being dictated by whoever they're working for. But I do like to help them build their own schedule, so to speak. So I am big on creating habits surrounding when they'll be training each week, when they eat around their workouts, what makes the most sense in terms of preparing their food and those sorts of things. But realistically, I still try and encourage them to be their own person and build a schedule that suits them. We're going to fit training and nutrition into that schedule. But I definitely want them to build the schedule that they want, so that then I can sort of plug and play what I can do to help them achieve the physique or the strength or the total, whatever it is that they're trying to achieve.
So it seems like this flexible dieting approach that you've become known for seems like it permeates like lifestyle.
100%, like, flexible lifestyle, of course.
Right? Okay, so let's dig to that. Like, let's finish the conversation there. Like, how do you stop a flexible lifestyle becoming a life of indulgence and gluttony?
A flexible lifestyle still has rigid guidelines.
Yeah, boundaries.
I like the term rigid guidelines, because they're guidelines, but they are followed rigidly, if that makes sense. Yeah. And what I mean by that is, I'll give you an example. We obviously want to be hitting precise calorie macro targets, ideally. Yep. But if you want to hit them every single day, or if you want to hit them over the course of a week, that's entirely up to you. I can tell you the pros and cons of doing both. But at the end of the day, you have the freedom to either hit your macros every single day, or if you go out and have a few beers one night, you might just decide, actually, it's going to be pretty hard to hit my daily macros today and tomorrow and the next day. So I'm just going to make some changes and still hit my weekly macros by the end of this week. I'm going to give you, let's say, 4 training sessions a week. And yeah, maybe it's ideal that you do on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. But if you've got a big corporate event on Thursday, and you're just not going to have time to train until 9 p.m. and you're going to be absolutely destroyed by then, let's just train Monday, Tuesday, Friday, Saturday. Who cares? It's flexible. We've got certain things that we want to achieve by the end of the week, but the way that we can go about achieving them, it's up to personal preference. It's open to interpretation, and it can change. It's fluid.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you heard the term, maybe you probably have, auto-regulation. Like that's
exactly right.
Simple term.
Exactly right. We have a common set of goals, i.e., we're talking about what it is you want to achieve over the course of the week. I'm guiding you to those goals, but provided you're able to achieve them by the end of the week, we're all good.
Right.
Same goes if you, I had a client message me this morning going, hey mate, they've just implemented 30-minute time slots at the gym to train. I'm like, well, that's not going to be long enough. And he goes, is it okay if I do one 30-minute time slot in the morning and come back later that night? I'm like, mate, if you can justify going back to the gym on the same day and you can still get through your workout, go for it.
It's like he's justified what most people would never do.
100%. But, I said to him, I was like, look, if that makes the most sense to you, go for it.
Awesome.
But if you want to then push that second half an hour onto the next day too, that's cool as well. You're only training 4 times a week. You don't need to be there every single day already.
Very true. Talk about flexible. Nutrition-wise, you have that flexible dieting approach, which enables psychologically, it seems like a healthier relationship with food overall. But I have been on the hunt over the last, 6 months, a year, trying to find, the most efficient, like low calorie, cost effective, like budget caloric effective foods that are also satiating and palatable and taste good, but don't break the caloric budget and, aren't rife with highly processed food, ideally. Do you have any foods like that? I don't know, like one example would be, hey, you love ice cream, right? But that high fat ice cream is going to be tough to fit in your budget, but this over here, this frozen dessert is what they call it technically by Tilly's or this other brand, is going to be, you're going to eat the whole tub and you can still get it. Do you have like a list in your head that you're like, this is awesome, this can replace that, this can replace that? Do you have that?
So you're asking about low calorie, high volume,
Yeah.
low sugar, non-processed, healthy, really tasty food.
It doesn't have to be low sugar necessarily, but low fat probably be a priority. Yeah, I feel like there's a joke coming at the end of this.
Yeah, that doesn't exist. Yeah. I think, like it'd be nice to think that we could achieve all of those things with every single food that we eat. But I think the best part about flexible dieting is it teaches you the consequences of your food decisions. You can have your cake if you want, but when you're tracking your macros and you have specific nutritional goals, choosing to eat that cake comes with consequences. Now, maybe you can justify those consequences when you eat the cake.
Yeah.
Maybe you can justify those consequences every time you eat the cake. But if you're consistently dieting and your intention is to lose body fat, particularly if you have a lot of it to lose, there's more than likely going to come a time where you can't justify eating the cake. But because you are tracking your macros and you understand the consequences of those food decisions, you're then empowered to be able to make the appropriate decision when that time comes. So do I, have a list of foods that are, more palatable, more satiating, less satiating? Sure, I can help out clients with choosing more suitable foods for whatever problem that is they're struggling with in their diet.
Mm.
But at the end of the day, I want to teach people how to eat based on their personal preferences, whilst also tracking down their goals. Like, yeah, there's always going to be some foods that you can substitute to achieve X, to achieve Y, to achieve Z, whether that's hunger, something more satiating, something tastier, something more voluminous in terms of the amount of food they can eat. But at the same time, all of these food choices come with consequences. And until you begin tracking your macros and understanding what's actually inside the foods you're eating, you don't even know what the consequences of those food choices are.
That's really important. Like, my selfish question aside, in trying to find more indulgent but guilt-free foods, it's really spot on, man. Like, developing the psychological framework to interact with essentially all foods in a healthy way is like, that's paramount importance.
100%.
What's the playbook there? Like, how do you establish? I don't know. It's a big question. I know, and it's not the best question, but it's a common problem, right? People's relationship with food. How do you tackle that beast, at least from like a 30-foot view, or 10,000-foot view?
I think it really depends on context. It depends where the person's coming from. People with an already seemingly healthy relationship with food, they're probably not going to have any issues with incorporating some form of restriction, whether that be through calorie or food-based restriction. For somebody that has had a history of a poor relationship with food, my instinct reaction would always be to give them more of it. More food.
More food in general.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that might mean a difficult conversation up front, which can be hard and ultimately lead to a non-sale. But, there's a lot of people that probably aren't ready to diet.
Yeah.
That don't understand that. I think, the idea of having a poor relationship with food, it's going to be very difficult to improve that when there is still some form of restriction placed upon you, whether that is through the foods that you're allowed to eat or calorie restriction. Often one will lead to the other. But if you are feeling restricted in any way, shape, or form, it's going to be very difficult to mend that relationship with food. You need to get somebody to the point where they're like, I could have that, but I don't feel like it anymore. Well, I don't want it. I don't need it. That's the best part. I don't need that. I can have it tomorrow if I want.
Yeah, that, I think a lot of people want to be able to get to that level of control.
I think flexible dieting gives them that opportunity, just because, particularly if they do have the capacity to eat more calories, and often what I'll do, particularly with a new client, particularly if they, have tried some poor dieting methods in the past, or, just don't have any history of tracking their macros. The best way to start off with any client is just to give them, I guess, closer to maintenance calories, or even put them in a slight surplus and just say, hey, this is the diet before the diet, to give you an opportunity of building some really good habits surrounding food, surrounding food tracking, surrounding food choices, whereby all I want you to do is figure out what you can eat and what works for you. Understand that when you eat a Mars bar, that actually takes out a pretty good chunk of calories, probably more than you realized, but you can eat it so long as you're willing to wear the consequences of it.
Yeah.
And through that process, they can then, better understand what's going to work for them in terms of the food choices most of the time, which then makes dieting more of an active choice than being like, well, I know I can eat that other thing, but I want to lose weight. And so I want to eat this other food instead of the Mars bar, whatever it might be. I'm not saying they always don't have to choose the Mars bar, but it gives them the opportunity and the power to make that decision for themselves.
Realize the consequences and make it a deliberate choice, right? Instead of like an emotional, reactive, I'm just going to grab that because maybe 100%. I know I can't have it, for example.
100%. And yeah, I'm big, on that note, I'm big on, really prioritizing the idea of planning ahead of time. I like to encourage my clients, particularly the ones that are, uber serious about losing weight. Like you have no excuses. If you're telling me your number one priority is to lose weight, then you need to be doing everything that I say, basically. And if you aren't planning your entire day ahead of time so that you are hitting your macro targets to within 5 grams, you are tracking absolutely everything that you're going to eat for that day before you start eating. If you aren't doing that, you're not doing everything you could be to be losing weight. You're not doing everything you could be to hitting, to be able to hit your macros to within 5 grams.
Yep.
And ultimately, understanding that if you're eating something that you haven't yet tracked in your food diary, you are accepting the consequences of that food decision, and you don't have a single idea what they are.
I think it's like buying things, but you don't even know how much they cost.
Correct. You don't know how much money you got left either. It's like
you wouldn't do like most people wouldn't accept that. Yet we do 100%. It, or a lot of people do it with their food and calories every day.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Like you can buy this car, you can walk away with it right now, and then it's going brilliant. And then they get home, and you're like,
how much that cost?
It was $100,000 more than you were wanting to spend. And right. Like, yeah, that's what happens to a lot of people every single day.
I think that's like the daily decisions people don't realize they make. Like, oh, I'm just gonna have that snack, that I'm gonna grab that satiating, not the highly palatable, non-satiating snack. I know you kind of like anti like snack as well. It's like I'm gonna grab that. Oh, just a little bit per day. And you look in a scale 1 year later, or you look in the mirror 1 year later, and that's a $100,000 spend, and you're 10 kilos heavier.
Exactly right.
Last thing, Nick. Actually, do you have a hard 5 p.m. out, or do you got a second?
I got a handful of minutes. Let's go.
A handful of minutes. I like that. You said maintaining this level of leanness will probably ruin your life in a recent post. And I resonate with that because I went through my own really hard first aggressive cut, transforming myself. I'm not as jacked as you, but I got like pretty much as lean, I would say.
To be honest, man, that doesn't really matter. Being lean's being lean. Everyone goes through the same sort of stuff. Doesn't matter how much muscle mass you carry at the same time. If you're lean, you're going through the challenges.
Yeah, and they were... I didn't even realize. Yeah. But it's good because then you realize. But I wonder, once you come out of that phase, you do something you've never done before. It's like you get a confidence over your body and mind like you've never had. Once you come out of that, all right, I'm getting back, that level of leanness, you don't hang on to, right? There's a certain amount you can, but it's not the same. And I wonder, how do you manage to stay emotionally detached and not almost addicted to the self-image and physique that you've created? Oh, I just want to hang on to this leanness, but I also, I'm coming out now and I want to put on muscle mass, be in a surplus, but that's going to come with some fat gain. How do you manage that psychologically to not stay attached to that self-image and ego of who you were in exchange for who you could be in the future?
Man, I think this comes back to that whole ego discussion that I had previously. Every single person is worth far more than their level of body fat. Their current level of conditioning. That doesn't make you who you are as a person. It certainly doesn't make you a better person. It doesn't make you a worse person. It just makes you a lean one. And I'd like to say that there is a way to remove that emotional connection between being lean and feeling great about being lean, but that will never go away. I promise you now, even when I'm a little bit leaner, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm fucking,
feels good.
Digging this. Yeah. But at the same time, same as all those food choices we're talking about, they come with consequences, like being that lean it means you can't do things, you know? And so I think what that comes down to is not only enjoying the process, you know, both sides of the process, you know, enjoying training, not just because you're getting lean, but because you enjoy training, enjoy eating and dieting because you enjoy, you know, eating that way, whether you're in a surplus or a deficit, but also appreciating that both phases come with plenty of positives. I would argue that bulking probably comes with more positives personally.
I would say so. Yeah.
But you know, there's positives to be gained from both phases. And I think we're so quick to focus on the negatives when we bulk and the positives only when we cut.
You mean the negatives only when we cut?
No.
The positives only when we bulk, and the neg.
No, other way around. So we focus on the positives of being lean, which is we're lean. This is
Oh,
great.
the
I love it.
outcome.
Yeah. But the negatives of being lean are like, well, I can't get it up. I'm hungry all the time. I can't have a beer with my friends. And I generally hate doing anything other than training and looking at myself in the mirror. No one talks about all those things, right? No one talks about all those things. They're just like, oh, I'm shredded, sick.
Yeah.
Not sick.
What a great summary.
Yeah, right. But then when you're bulking, like all of those things like come back with a vengeance and you can actually enjoy your life. But we're like, oh, this sucks because I'm getting a bit fat. You know, well, you're not getting fat. You're just not as lean as you were. But you know, like that 4, 5, 6% body fat has just afforded you the opportunity to live the life that you actually want to live.
So it's a perspective reframe that helps keep you detached emotionally.
Yeah, I think so. You know, I like to focus on. I like to focus on the positives. You know, right now, like I'm not overly lean. Like I'm probably sitting towards the heavier end of where I've been for quite a while. And like, yeah, I definitely don't look as good as I have looked in the past. But at the same time, my ability to demolish a pizza is second to none. And like for me right now, that works.
I like you own it, man. I respect that. Like because you could easily feel like pressured, and maybe you do at times by like keeping this self-image up to all the millions or hundreds of thousands of people who watch you and look up to you. I'm sure maybe that's a different conversation for another day, but you sound like you own it, and maybe you've figured out a way to be less pressured by those pressures.
And I think that's just a case of having felt that pressure for quite some time and just deciding that I've had enough of it. You know, when I think, you know, life is ultimately very short, and you know, it might take losing a loved one to realize that. But I think when that happens, it puts a lot of things into perspective, right? And like, if we are going to chase body composition improvements, you know, chances are we're going to spend a fair amount of time in the gym, right? For me, training is, you know, like I've obviously made a career out of the gym, training in the gym and helping people with dieting and building muscle and losing body fat. But if we can't go into the gym and enjoy the overall experience, then it's another pain point. And so, you know, I got to a point where I was like, what is it that I actually enjoy about training? And like, it took me a while to figure it out, but you know, I love the feeling of being able to push myself and almost creating this hole that I can then go and fill with food. You know, like I love just punishing myself in the gym, feeling like I've worked hard. It probably feeds into my personality type a little bit, feeling like I've accomplished something in the gym. I've pushed myself, you know, to a point that probably most people can't push themselves to. And then I'm going to go and enjoy my food because I can.
Is it like a reward thing? Do you feel like maybe you can't enjoy the food as much mentally if you don't push as hard?
No, I don't think it's that. But, you know, I certainly enjoy, you know, I don't think it's a reward thing. You know, I think that probably borders more on unhealthy. I certainly don't train to eat, if that makes sense. You know, I love the training part and I love the food part, and those two things are separate from one another. You know, I would eat a pizza whether or not I trained. It's just that, you know, I also love the fact that I can use that pizza to then train hard the next day as well.
Got it.
But yeah, just, you know, for me, it's the process. You know, I get to train, I get to enjoy my training session, I get to work hard and push my own boundaries and see if I can do, you know, better this week than I did last week, or better this month than I did last month. And then, you know, I can enjoy my food because life is too short to then go and eat chicken and broccoli.
On that note, Nick, man, thank you for the time. Thank you for just speaking with authenticity and kind of owning who you are instead of putting out a facade that I think a lot of people try. So thank you for that. And yeah, if you got any last comments, thoughts, asks of our audience, or just where people can find you, where you'd point them.
NickCheadleFitness.com is probably the easiest place to go. All my usernames are pretty much Nick Cheadle Fitness. So any questions or anything that you're looking for, you can probably find me on one of those platforms, Instagram, Facebook, or my website.
In one sentence, what are you most excited for in 2021?
Growth.
Done. Nick, you're a good man. Maybe one day our paths will cross if I'm ever in Sydney. If you're ever in Melbourne and need anything from us, you let me know.
Will do, mate.
All right.
Pleasure speaking with you.
You too. See you, buddy.
See you, mate.
Nick Cheadle, ladies and gentlemen. Number 40 podcast. I really appreciated that conversation. Just as we got along, it opened up in the things we talked about. It was a very dynamic conversation, from business to personal to ego to nutrition. I really appreciated his, as I said, authenticity, and just like, he humanizes somebody when they can just own it. It's like, yeah, I'm going to fully enjoy and experience like my intentional decisions to do something that a lot of people feel guilty for, and that's like eating fun, indulgent luxury foods like a pizza. And so, hope you guys enjoyed that conversation, took some things away from it. Like, consistency is a big thing. Consistency, like showing people who you are, and consistency. And for a lot of you young coaches and trainers and businesses who are trying to grow, like that's definitely a takeaway for me. Or a reminder. It's a reminder because, Rogan says that as well about his podcast. Just turn up, show up consistently every week, be there. Like, let people so people can expect you and rely that you're going to be there. And it's a commonality that I keep hearing amongst these highly successful individuals and people. And showing people who you are, which is probably something that you guys see on these podcasts, but something we and I could do a better job on personally as well. Speaking of personally, something I could do a better job on is you guys can find me at Strength of Sard. If you want to see my coaching training page, or Alexander Emmanuel Sandalis. And then you can find Orphic Education everywhere. All these podcasts available, all platforms, YouTube, Facebook. If you guys have any guests that you would recommend, comment them below. Any questions for future guests, stay tuned to our social media. Otherwise, we'll see you guys next week.